A black homeless girl sleeps in the park every single night. The cop cannot hold his tears when he finds out why. What circumstances led her here? Will the cop be able to save this lonely girl? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The amber glow of streetlights cast long shadows across Oakwood Park as Officer Sam Miller guided his patrol car along the familiar curved path. His coffee, now lukewarm, did little to lift his spirits. 28 years on the force had left him feeling hollow, like an old tree with its heart carved out. Sam took another sip from his paper cup and grimaced. The bitter taste matched his mood perfectly. 2 more years, he muttered to himself, counting down to retirement. The radio crackled with routine updates, but he barely registered them anymore. Everything felt distant, mechanical. The patrol car's headlights swept across empty playground equipment, creating eerie shadows that danced against the background of bare trees. Sam remembered when this job used to excite him, when every shift held the promise of making a real difference. Now it all felt like going through the motions. As he rounded the bend near the old picnic area, something caught his attention. There, on one of the wooden benches, was what looked like a bundle of cloth. Sam slowed the car, squinting through the darkness. The bundle moved slightly. His heart quickened as he pulled over and grabbed his flashlight. Training and instinct took over as he approached carefully, beam of light steady on the bench. The bundle revealed itself to be a small figure huddled beneath a thin, dirty blanket. "Hello?" Sam called out softly, crouching down to appear less intimidating. "I'm Officer Miller. Are you okay?" The blanket shifted and a pair of wide, frightened eyes peered out. A young girl, no more than 7 or 8, clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit to her chest. The sight hit Sam like a physical blow, stirring something deep inside him that he thought had long since faded. "You don't need to be scared," he said gently, keeping his distance. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" The girl's eyes darted between Sam and the patrol car as if calculating her chances of running. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Lily." "Lily," Sam repeated warmly. "That's a beautiful name. Are you out here all alone?" She nodded slowly, fingers tightening around her rabbit. "Where are your parents, Lily?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "They're gone. The car. There was an accident." Her voice trembled. "The lady who was there, she—" Sam leaned forward slightly, but Lily fell silent, drawing the blanket tighter around herself. Something in her expression spoke of more than just grief. There was fear there, raw and recent. Looking at this fragile child, Sam felt decades of cynicism crumbling away. Protocol dictated he should call this in immediately, but something in his gut told him that wasn't the right move. Not yet. "Listen, Lily," he said, his voice soft but steady. "It's cold out here, and it's not safe. How about we go somewhere warm? The police station has comfortable couches and hot chocolate. Would you like that?" Lily studied his face for a long moment as if searching for something. Finally, she gave a tiny nod. Sam reached out his hand, moving slowly. "Come on then. Let's get you warmed up." The patrol car's heater hummed softly as Sam drove through the quiet streets. Every few minutes, he glanced in the rearview mirror at Lily, who sat rigid in the back seat. Her small hands hadn't loosened their grip on the stuffed rabbit, and her eyes darted between the passing streetlights and shop windows. "We'll be there in about 5 minutes," Sam said, keeping his voice gentle. "The station's pretty quiet this time of night. Nothing to worry about." Lily didn't respond, but he noticed her shoulders relax slightly. "That's a nice rabbit you've got there," he tried again. "Does it have a name?" After a long pause, she whispered, "Hoppy." Sam smiled. "Hoppy. I like that name." The station's parking lot was nearly empty when they arrived. Sam opened the back door for Lily, who climbed out carefully, her eyes scanning the building's brick facade. He led her inside, nodding to Officer Martinez at the front desk, who raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. Sam cleared some space near his desk, pulling up a comfortable chair. "Here you go, Lily. Would you like something to eat?" We've got some snacks in the break room. She hesitated before giving a tiny nod. I'll be right back, he assured her, returning minutes later with a handful of options: granola bars, apple juice, and a package of cookies. Lily's eyes widened at the sight, but she didn't reach for anything until Sam placed them on the desk and stepped back. While she nibbled cautiously on a cookie, Sam picked up his phone and dialed Linda Taylor, the on-call social worker. He kept his voice low, but in the quiet station, snippets of conversation carried. Yes, about 7 or 8. No, found her in the park. Mentioned an accident. Lily's hand froze mid-bite. Tears began rolling down her cheeks as she heard the words shelter and placement. Please, she whimpered, the cookie crumbling in her trembling fingers. Don't make me go back there. The big kids, they take everything. Nobody listens when I tell them. They just... Her voice broke off in a sob. Sam's chest tightened as he watched her curl into herself, making her already small frame appear even tinier. He spoke into the phone again. Linda, what's the current situation at the shelters? He listened for a moment, his frown deepening. I see. Yes, I understand. Thanks. Setting down the phone, Sam knelt beside Lily's chair. Hey, he said softly, waiting until she met his eyes. You don't have to go back tonight, okay? We'll figure something else out tomorrow. The relief that flooded her face was immediate, though fear still lingered in her eyes. She clutched Hoppy closer, her knuckles white against the rabbit's worn fur. Sam noticed how she seemed to be holding something back, her gaze occasionally distant as if revisiting memories she wasn't ready to share. Sam's small house stood quiet in the evening darkness, its porch light casting a warm glow as he unlocked the front door. He stepped aside, letting Lily enter first. Her eyes darted around the modest living room, taking in the worn but comfortable furniture, family photos on the walls, and a small television in the corner. It's not much, Sam said, closing the door behind them. But it's home. Let me show you where you'll sleep tonight. He led her down a short hallway to the spare bedroom. The room was simple but clean, with fresh sheets on the twin bed and a nightstand with a soft glowing lamp. Lily stood in the doorway, clutching Hoppy to her chest. You can put your things here, Sam gestured to the dresser. The bathroom's right across the hall. Lily nodded, taking a small step into the room. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Are you hungry? Sam asked. I can make us something to eat. In the kitchen, Sam prepared a simple meal of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. He watched as Lily carefully sat at the small kitchen table, her feet dangling above the floor. When he placed the food in front of her, her eyes widened. It's okay, he assured her. Eat as much as you'd like. They ate in comfortable silence, broken only by the quiet clink of spoons against bowls. Halfway through her sandwich, Lily spoke up. This is really good, she said, offering Sam a tiny smile. I can't remember the last time someone made me dinner. Sam felt his heart squeeze at her words. Well, he said, keeping his voice steady, everyone deserves a good meal. After dinner, Lily began to explore the house, moving cautiously from room to room. She paused at the bookshelf in the living room, running her finger along the spines of old paperbacks. It feels different here, she said suddenly, hugging Hoppy close. At the shelter, I always had to watch my back. But here, she trailed off, looking around. I feel safe. The simple statement hit Sam like a physical force. He watched as this small, brave girl continued her careful exploration, and something shifted inside him. This wasn't just another case to process through the system. This was a child who needed help, real help, and for the first time in years, he felt truly needed. When bedtime came, Sam helped Lily settle into the spare room. He tucked the blankets around her and Hoppy, noticing how her face had lost some of its earlier tension. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but there was something else there too. Relief. Good night, Lily, he said softly. If you need anything, I'm just down the hall. She nodded, already half asleep. Thank you, Officer Sam, she murmured, for everything. Standing in the doorway, watching her drift off to sleep, Sam felt a familiar protective instinct surge through him. He couldn't remember the last time his work had felt this meaningful, this right. He knew he needed to understand more about what had happened to her before making any decisions about her future. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows as Sam prepared a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast. Lily sat at the table, looking more rested than she had the night before, though shadows still lingered under her eyes. She picked at her food, pushing the eggs around her plate with her fork. "These are good," she said softly, taking a small bite. "My mom used to make eggs like this." Her voice caught slightly on the word mom. Sam sat down across from her, his coffee cup warming his hands. "Would you like to tell me about your parents, Lily?" he asked gently. She gripped Hoppy tighter in her lap but nodded slowly. They were really nice. Dad always told funny jokes and Mom read me stories every night." Her lower lip trembled. But then the accident happened. Sam leaned forward slightly, careful not to appear too eager. "Can you tell me about the accident?" Lily's fork clattered against her plate. "We were driving home from the movies. It was dark." She squeezed her eyes shut. "There was a big crash and then everything went quiet. I saw a lady. She got out of her car and looked at us, but then she just ran away." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "She left us there." Sam felt his chest tighten at her words. A hit and run. He reached across the table, offering her a tissue. "That must have been very scary," he said quietly. After Lily had calmed down and finished what she could of her breakfast, Sam stepped into his study to make a phone call. Grace Monroe, a detective he'd worked with for years, answered on the second ring. "Grace, I need some information about a case," Sam explained, keeping his voice low. "A hit and run involving the Evans family. The parents didn't survive." He heard Grace typing on her computer. "Yes, I have it here," she said after a moment. "James and Marie Evans, deceased approximately 8 months ago. Their daughter Lily survived." Grace paused. "Sam, the driver was never found. The only evidence was some paint transfer on the Evans vehicle, suggesting a dark-colored sedan." Sam's free hand clenched into a fist. "Any witnesses?" "None came forward," Grace replied, though the case notes mention their daughter might have seen something. Poor thing was in shock when emergency services arrived. She couldn't provide many details. Sam glanced through the study door at Lily, who sat quietly at the kitchen table, still holding her stuffed rabbit. His protective instincts surged stronger than ever. This child had witnessed something terrible, lost everything, and then been shuffled through a system that had failed to protect her. "Thanks, Grace," he said, ending the call. His mind was already working through the implications. Lily's mention of the woman at the scene could be crucial information, details that might help solve the case that had destroyed her family. But more importantly, this little girl needed someone to keep her safe, someone to help her heal from the trauma she'd endured. The next few days settled into a gentle rhythm that brought a sense of peace to both Sam and Lily. Each morning, they shared breakfast before Sam walked Lily next door to Margaret's house, a cozy home that smelled of fresh-baked cookies and always seemed filled with warmth. Margaret Saunders, with her silver hair and kind smile, had accepted Sam's story about Lily being his niece without question. "Poor dear needs some time away from home," was all Sam had said, and Margaret had nodded sympathetically. "Such a sweet child," Margaret often remarked as she welcomed Lily inside. She kept Lily busy with simple crafts and baking projects, teaching her how to make sugar cookies and helping her create colorful paper chains that now decorated her kitchen windows. But not everything felt as comfortable as Margaret's kitchen. Sam couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, particularly by Judith Palmer, who lived 3 houses down. He'd catch glimpses of her through her front window, curtains twitching as he and Lily walked past. Sometimes she'd be coincidentally checking her mail when they returned home, her sharp eyes following their movements. One evening, as Sam returned from work, he found Judith standing near his mailbox, pretending to water the flowers in her portable planter. Her presence felt calculated, making him instantly alert. "Evening, Officer Miller," she said, her voice overly friendly. "I couldn't help but notice your young visitor. Such a precious little thing." Sam kept his expression neutral. "Yes, she is." "Funny, I don't recall you mentioning any family before," Judith pressed, moving closer. "And she looks nothing like you, different coloring entirely." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "How long did you say she'd be staying?" "I didn't," Sam replied carefully, checking his mailbox to avoid her probing gaze. "She's just visiting for a while." "Oh?" Judith's voice took on an edge. "And her parents? They're okay with her staying with a single man? In this day and age, one can't be too careful about children's safety." Sam felt his jaw tighten at the implied accusation. Before he could respond, he spotted Lily walking up the sidewalk with Margaret, carrying what looked like a fresh batch of cookies. Judith's demeanor changed instantly. She stepped back, her face flooding with an emotion Sam couldn't quite read. Was it fear? "Well, I should go," she said quickly, already turning away. "Those plants won't water themselves." She hurried back to her house, throwing one last glance over her shoulder at Lily. Sam watched her retreat, a knot forming in his stomach. Something about Judith's reaction to Lily's appearance bothered him deeply. Her questions hadn't just been nosy. They'd felt pointed, almost threatening. He worried that she might contact Child Protective Services, jeopardizing the fragile stability he'd built for Lily. As Lily approached with Margaret, proudly holding up a plate of chocolate chip cookies, Sam forced a smile. But inside, his mind was racing. He needed to be more careful, more vigilant. Judith Palmer's interest in Lily felt dangerous, and he couldn't risk losing the trust and safety they'd worked so hard to establish. Sam's police instincts had kicked into high gear. After Judith's suspicious behavior, he found himself watching her house during his morning coffee, noting her daily routines from his kitchen window. Her interest in Lily seemed far too specific to be mere neighborly concern. One afternoon, as Sam drove home from his shift, he spotted Judith in her open garage. She was standing at a dusty workbench, carefully removing what appeared to be a yellowed newspaper clipping from a folder. The way she handled it, with trembling hands and intense focus, made Sam's inner alarm bells ring louder. He pulled into his driveway slowly, pretending to be absorbed in a phone call while watching Judith through his rearview mirror. She quickly tucked the clipping away when she noticed his car, her movements jerky and nervous. That sealed it for Sam. He needed a closer look. The next day, Sam knocked on Judith's front door, plastering on his friendliest neighbor smile. "Hey, Judith. Hope I'm not bothering you," he said when she answered, looking startled to see him. "My socket wrench set seems to have gone missing. I don't suppose you'd have one I could borrow?" "Oh, yes, come in," Judith replied, stepping back reluctantly. "I think I have some tools in the kitchen." As she led him through her living room, Sam's trained eye swept the space. The walls held several framed photos of the neighborhood, spanning what looked like years of casual observation. But what caught his attention was her coffee table, scattered with newspaper clippings partially covered by a magazine. While Judith rummaged in a kitchen drawer, Sam casually shifted the magazine. His heart nearly stopped. There, in black and white, was the headline he'd been researching. "Local couple dies in hit and run, daughter orphaned." The article showed a photo of Lily's parents, their smiling faces a stark contrast to the tragic story below. "Here it is." Judith's voice made him straighten quickly. She returned with the wrench, but Sam barely registered it in his hand. His mind was racing, processing this new information. Judith hadn't just been following Lily's case, she'd been collecting information about it, hiding it in plain sight in her living room. "Thanks, I'll bring it back tomorrow," Sam managed to say, keeping his voice steady despite his growing unease. "Sam!" As he walked back to his house, the weight of the borrowed wrench felt heavy in his hand. Judith's apparent obsession with Lily's tragedy wasn't random. She had been following this case long before Lily appeared in the neighborhood. The question was why, and Sam was determined to find out. Sam returned home to find Lily curled up on the couch with her stuffed rabbit, watching cartoons. The sight of her peaceful face made his heart warm, reinforcing his determination to protect her. She looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes that had somehow managed to crack through his weathered exterior. "Hey, kiddo, how about we make a grocery run? We're running low on just about everything," Sam said, grabbing his car keys. Lily shook her head. "Can I stay with Miss Margaret? Shopping makes me nervous." Sam understood. After everything she'd been through, crowded places were still challenging for her. "Sure thing. Let me check if she's available." Margaret was more than happy to watch Lily, and soon Sam found himself pushing a cart through the fluorescent-lit aisles of Parker's Market. He was comparing cereal boxes when a familiar voice called out, "Sam, got a minute?" It was Dave Thompson, his next-door neighbor on the other side, a retired schoolteacher who'd always been friendly but kept to himself. Sam put the cereal in his cart. "Sure, Dave, what's on your mind?" Dave shifted uncomfortably, lowering his voice. "Look, I've seen the little girl staying with you. Margaret mentioned she's your niece, but..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I used to work with child services sometimes back when I was teaching. I know what can happen when things aren't done properly." Sam felt his shoulders tense. "Dave..." "I'm not judging," Dave continued quickly. "I can see you're trying to help, but keeping her without proper documentation, without CPS involvement, it's risky. For both of you." Sam leaned against his shopping cart, sighing. "I know what you're saying, and I appreciate the concern. But you haven't seen what I've seen, Dave. That girl ran from the system for a reason. The stories she's told me about the shelter..." He shook his head. "I can't send her back there. Not yet. At least, not until I figure something out." Neither man noticed Judith Palmer standing in the next aisle, pretending to study soup cans while straining to hear every word. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up each can, set it down, picked up another. "Just be careful," Dave said, patting Sam's shoulder. "You're a good man with a big heart. I'd hate to see either of you get hurt because things weren't handled properly." "I understand the risks," Sam replied firmly, "but sometimes doing the right thing means breaking a few rules." As the men's voices faded, Judith remained frozen in place, her shopping basket forgotten at her feet. Her face had gone pale, and her breathing became shallow as she processed what she'd just heard. After overhearing the conversation at the grocery store, Judith rushed home, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her house keys. Inside, she paced her living room for several minutes, wringing her hands. The guilt of her past actions and the fear of discovery warred within her until she finally reached for her phone. With trembling fingers, she dialed Child Protective Services. Her voice quivered as she spoke. "I need to report something. Anonymously." She paused, swallowing hard. "There's a police officer, Sam Miller, who's keeping a little girl at his house. Her name is Lily. She's African American, about 7 or 8 years old. I don't think it's legal. She's not really his niece." Hours later, Sam was helping Lily with her reading when sharp knocks echoed through the house. He opened the door to find 2 CPS workers, their faces stern and professional. "Mr. Miller, I'm Karen Matthews from Child Protective Services. We received a report about an unauthorized minor in your care." Sam's heart sank. His mind raced to the conversation at the grocery store, wondering who could have reported him. "Please, let me explain." "Sir, we need to take the child into protective custody immediately," the male worker stated firmly. Lily, hearing the exchange, appeared in the hallway. Her eyes widened with fear, and she ran to Sam, clutching his leg. "No, please, I don't want to go." Sam knelt down to her level, his heart breaking at the sight of her tears. "Lily, sweetheart, it's going to be okay, I promise you." "You said I wouldn't have to go back," Lily sobbed, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly. The CPS workers moved forward, and despite Sam's protests, they began gathering Lily's few belongings. Sam watched helplessly as they led her toward their van, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. "Wait," Sam called out. "Let me follow you there, please." The workers nodded reluctantly, and Sam got into his car, trailing the van through the darkening streets. At the orphanage, a brick building with peeling paint, Sam was allowed a brief goodbye. He knelt before Lily in the stark entrance hall, wiping her tears with his thumb. "Listen to me, kiddo. This isn't the end, okay? I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to come back for you." Lily sniffled, clutching her rabbit closer. You promise? I promise, but you need to be brave for me. Can you do that? Lily nodded, her lower lip trembling. I'll be brave, Sam. I promise too. Sam watched as they led her away, his chest tight with grief. The drive back to his empty house felt endless. When he finally walked through his door, the silence was deafening. He sank into his armchair, putting his head in his hands, the weight of failure pressing down on him. Lily's half-finished reading book still lay open on the coffee table, a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. Sam sat in his dimly lit living room, staring at Lily's empty chair. The house felt too quiet, too empty without her presence. After a moment of heavy silence, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. Hey Mike, it's Sam Miller. He ran a hand through his graying hair. Listen, I need a favor, and it's not exactly by the book. Mike Thompson's familiar voice crackled through the speaker. Sam, haven't heard from you in ages. What's going on? That girl that CPS picked up today? Someone made an anonymous call about her. Sam's voice grew tight. I need to know where that call came from. There was a long pause on the other end. Sam, you know I can't give out that information. It's confidential. Mike, please. Sam leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. This isn't just about protocol. That little girl, she's been through something terrible. I think whoever made that call might be connected to what happened to her parents. The hit-and-run case? Mike's voice softened slightly. I heard about that. Yes, there's more to this than just a concerned citizen making a call. I need to know who's trying to keep her in the system. Mike sighed heavily. Sam, we go way back. You were there for me during the divorce, but this could cost me my job. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Sam's voice grew earnest. That girl needs help, Mike. Real help, not just another bed in another overcrowded facility. The line went quiet for so long that Sam thought Mike had hung up. Finally, his old friend's voice returned, barely above a whisper. Give me an hour. Don't make me regret this. True to his word, Mike called back exactly 1 hour later. Sam grabbed his phone on the first ring. I'm sending you the information now, Mike said quietly. But Sam, you didn't get this from me. Sam's phone buzzed with an incoming text. As he opened the message, his eyes widened, and his free hand clenched into a fist. There on the screen was an address he knew all too well, Judith Palmer's house, just 3 doors down from his own. You're sure about this? Sam's voice was barely controlled. The call came from that address, no doubt about it. Mike paused. Sam, whatever you're planning. Thanks, Mike. I owe you one. Sam ended the call, staring at the address on his phone screen. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Judith's suspicious behavior, her intense interest in Lily, the newspaper clippings about the accident. His neighbor wasn't just a nosy busybody. She was somehow connected to the tragedy that had left Lily orphaned. Sam stood up, his jaw set with determination. The truth about Judith Palmer and her connection to Lily's past was finally within reach. Sam stormed out of his house, his footsteps heavy against the pavement, as he marched toward Judith's front door. The evening air felt thick with tension, matching the anger bubbling inside him. Without hesitation, he pounded on her door, his knuckles turning white from the force. After a moment, Judith opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of Sam's stern expression. Officer Miller? What? Cut the act, Judith. Sam's voice was low and controlled, but trembling with anger. I know you made that call to CPS. I know you're the one who took Lily away. Judith's face paled and she took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about. Sam pushed the door wider, stepping into her entryway. Don't lie to me. I've seen the newspaper clippings you keep. The ones about the hit and run that killed Lily's parents. His eyes narrowed as he watched her fidget nervously. And I've noticed how you always turn away when Lily's around, like you can't bear to look at her. Judith's hands began to shake as she wrapped her arms around herself. You had no right to go through my things. And you had no right to interfere with that little girl's life. Sam's voice rose slightly. Why, Judith? Why are you so interested in Lily's case? Why do you have all those clippings? Tears began to well up in Judith's eyes. I was just concerned about her welfare. A single man taking in a young girl without proper documentation. Stop it, Sam cut her off. This isn't about concern. This is about something else. He stepped closer, his police training kicking in as he observed her nervous behavior. You can't even look at her when she's around. You hide behind your curtains watching us. What are you hiding, Judith? Judith's lower lip trembled as she backed away from him, bumping into a side table. A framed photo crashed to the floor, the glass cracking. Please, Officer Miller. You don't understand? Then help me understand. Sam's voice was firm but quieter now. Because right now, all I see is a woman who seems obsessed with a tragic accident, who can't face a little girl who lost everything, and who went out of her way to have that same girl taken away from the first place she felt safe since her parents died. Judith slumped against the wall, her facade crumbling. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the floor, unable to meet Sam's intense gaze. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and her breathing became irregular. The guilt that had been eating at her for months was clearly visible in every trembling movement she made. Sam stood there watching her breakdown, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of all this. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths and hidden guilt. Judith's shoulders sagged as the weight of her secret became too heavy to bear. Tears streamed down her face as she slid down the wall to sit on the floor, her hands covering her face. "I didn't mean to," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was dark, and I was tired. I didn't see their car until it was too late." Sam stood perfectly still, his fists clenched at his sides as the truth he'd suspected finally came out. "You were the one who hit their car?" Judith nodded, her whole body shaking. "I panicked. When I got out and saw what I'd done..." She drew in a shuddering breath. "There was this little girl in the back seat, crying. Her parents weren't moving. I just ran. I got in my car and drove away." "You left her there?" Sam's voice was deadly quiet. "You left a child alone with her dead parents?" "I was scared," Judith cried out. "I couldn't think straight. I just kept driving. By the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late to come forward." Sam took a step toward her, his face red with anger. "Do you have any idea what you've done to her? The trauma she's been through? I'm placing you under arrest right now." At those words, Judith's demeanor suddenly changed. She pushed herself up from the floor, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. Her eyes hardened as she looked at Sam. "No, you won't," she said, her voice taking on a defiant edge. "You have no proof. Nothing but the word of a confused little girl who claims she saw someone at the accident. That's not evidence, Officer Miller." "You just confessed?" "To what?" Judith cut him off, growing bolder. "A conversation in my home with no witnesses? No recording? Get out of my house, Officer Miller. You're trespassing." Sam's jaw clenched so tight he could hear his teeth grinding. She was right. He had nothing concrete to prove her guilt. His hands shook with rage as he pointed at her. "This isn't over," he growled. "You'll pay for what you did to that family, to Lily. I promise you that." Judith lifted her chin, though her hand still trembled slightly. "Get out." Sam turned and stormed toward the door, his footsteps heavy on her wooden floors. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. "I will find proof, Judith, and when I do, I'll make sure you never hurt another child again." He slammed the door behind him so hard that the windows rattled in their frames. Standing on her porch, he took several deep breaths of the cool evening air, trying to calm his racing heart and the fury coursing through his veins. Sam paced his living room floor, his footsteps echoing through the empty house. Every corner, every shadow reminded him of Lily's brief stay, making his heart ache even more. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but sleep felt impossible with his mind racing. He dropped heavily onto his couch, running his hands through his graying hair. Judith's confession played over and over in his head. The image of Lily, alone and terrified after the accident, made his blood boil all over again. He grabbed his notepad from the coffee table and started writing. desperate to find some way to prove Judith's guilt. Traffic cameras, he muttered, scribbling frantically. Hospital records, car repair shops. But each potential lead seemed to hit a dead end before it began. Too much time had passed. Any security footage would be long gone, and car repairs from that time would be nearly impossible to trace. At 2 a.m., Sam moved to his kitchen table, spreading out old newspaper articles about the accident that he'd collected. His coffee had gone cold, but he barely noticed as he read through them for the 100th time, searching for any detail he might have missed. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but every time he closed them, he saw Lily's face, scared and alone in that orphanage. He'd promised to come back for her, and he wouldn't let her down, not like everyone else had. By 3 a.m., Sam had called in several favors from other officers, leaving messages asking them to check old records, look for similar hit-and-runs, anything that might connect to Judith. His notebook was filled with scattered thoughts and half-formed plans, most crossed out in frustration. He slouched in his chair, staring at the ceiling, the weight of helplessness pressed down on his chest. Judith was right. Without concrete evidence, her confession meant nothing. And she was careful, had been for years. She'd hidden her guilt behind a facade of nosy neighbor curiosity, watching Lily from afar, perhaps tortured by her own conscience, but never enough to come forward. Around 4 a.m., Sam finally dragged himself to bed, his body heavy with exhaustion. He lay there, watching shadows dance across his ceiling as cars passed outside. His mind kept spinning with possibilities, security cameras from nearby businesses, paint samples from the accident scene, witnesses who might have seen something but never came forward. Eventually, sometime after 5 a.m., Sam's eyes grew too heavy to keep open. His last thoughts before drifting off were of Lily and the promise he'd made. As sleep finally claimed him, his hand still clutched the notepad filled with his desperate plans for justice, the paper crumpled against his chest. The next morning, Sam drove to the CPS orphanage, his police badge ensuring him easy access to visit Lily. The building was a stark brick structure that seemed to loom over the small playground outside. Inside, the fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow over the institutional green walls. When Lily saw Sam walking down the hallway, her face lit up with a mixture of hope and relief. She ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. Sam felt his heart tighten, noticing she was still clutching the same stuffed rabbit. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, her voice muffled against his jacket. Sam led her to a small table in the corner of the common room, away from the other children who were playing nearby. A staff member watched them from across the room, but stayed far enough away to give them privacy. "Lily," Sam began gently, crouching down to her eye level, "I need to ask you something important about what happened to your parents. Is that okay?" Lily nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around her rabbit's ears. Her eyes, usually bright, grew distant, as if looking into the past. "You mentioned a lady was there that night," Sam said softly. "The one who hit your parents' car. Can you tell me what you remember about her?" Lily's lower lip trembled slightly. "We were coming home from the movies," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was raining. The lady's car came really fast around the corner." Sam took out his small notebook but kept it low, not wanting to frighten her. "Did you see what she looked like?" Lily nodded again. "She got out of her car after it happened. She looked scared. She had gray hair, kind of curly. Her small hands gestured around her head. She was wearing a blue coat. I saw her face when she looked in our window right at me. Then she ran back to her car and drove away really fast." Sam felt his heart racing but kept his voice calm. "Would you recognize her if you saw her again?" "Yes," Lily said without hesitation. "She looked right at me. I remember her face." She hugged her rabbit closer. "Sometimes I see her in my dreams." Sam reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "You're very brave, Lily. Thank you for telling me this." "Are you going to find her?" Lily asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "I'm going to try my very best," Sam promised, his determination growing stronger with each passing moment. The description matched Judith perfectly, and now he had a witness, though getting testimony from a child would be challenging. Lily leaned forward, lowering her voice. She had a scratch on her face too, right here. She pointed to her right cheek. Like a little line. Sam's eyes widened slightly. He'd noticed that same small scar on Judith's face during their confrontation. This was the detail he needed, something only someone who had seen her up close would know. Sam's heart raced as he pulled out his phone, his fingers quickly dialing the station. This was the breakthrough he'd been waiting for, a positive identification from the only witness to the hit and run. Within minutes, he had dispatched 2 patrol units to Judith's house. "Stay here with Ms. Thompson," Sam told Lily gently, nodding to the CPS worker. "I'll be back soon to get you." He drove to Judith's house, arriving just as the patrol cars pulled up, their lights flashing silently in the early afternoon sun. Officers Martinez and Chen approached the front door, their steps measured and professional. Sam watched from his car, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Martinez knocked firmly on the door. "Police! Open up, Ms. Palmer." After a long moment, the door creaked open. Judith stood there, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes darted between the officers before landing on Sam's car in the background. "Judith Palmer," Officer Chen announced. "You're under arrest for leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death and vehicular manslaughter. You have the right to remain silent." As Chen continued reading her rights, Martinez gently but firmly secured the handcuffs around Judith's wrists. She didn't resist, but her shoulders slumped in defeat. The neighbors began peeking through their windows, drawn by the commotion. Sam waited until the officers had Judith secured in the back of their patrol car before heading back to the CPS facility. His heart felt lighter, knowing justice was finally within reach. When he arrived at the orphanage, Lily was waiting anxiously with Ms. Thompson. "Ready to help me with something important?" he asked, kneeling down to her level. Lily nodded bravely, though her hands clutched her stuffed rabbit tighter. At the station, Sam carefully arranged everything to protect Lily, while ensuring a proper identification. He positioned her in an observation room with a one-way mirror, making sure she felt safe and comfortable. Officer Chen stood with her while Sam stepped out to oversee Judith's processing. "Lily," Sam said gently through the intercom, "I'm going to have some people walk through the next room. If you see the lady from that night, just tell Officer Chen, okay?" "Okay," Lily's small voice came through, steady despite her nervousness. They brought in 5 women of similar age and appearance to Judith, having them walk through one at a time. When Judith entered, number 4 in the lineup, Lily's breath caught audibly. "That's her," she whispered, then said more firmly, "That's the lady. She has the scratch on her face, just like I remembered." Sam felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had her. With Lily's positive identification and the evidence they'd gathered, Judith would finally have to answer for what she'd done. Through the one-way glass, he could see Judith's shoulders shake slightly, as if she knew her years of hiding were finally over. Sam walked into the interrogation room where Judith sat, her hands folded neatly on the metal table. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting the old scratch mark that had become a faint scar. The same mark Lily had remembered from that tragic night. "It's over, Judith," Sam said, his voice steady but firm as he took the seat across from her. "We know everything now. Lily just identified you." Judith's fingers twitched, but she kept her composure, staring down at her hands. "All those years of hiding your face whenever Lily was around," Sam continued, laying out the newspaper clippings he'd found in her house. "The way you'd turn away or hurry inside. It wasn't because you were shy, was it? It was guilt. You knew she might recognize you." Color drained from Judith's face as Sam spread the articles across the table. Each one detailed the hit-and-run accident that had claimed the lives of Lily's parents. "You've been collecting these, haven't you, keeping tabs on the case on Lily? Was it eating away at you, Judith? Living right there in the neighborhood, watching that little girl suffer, knowing you were responsible?" Judith's lips trembled. "You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," Sam cut her off, his voice growing harder. "You hit their car that night and left them to die. You left a 7-year-old girl alone in this world. Then you had the nerve to call CPS when you saw her staying with me, didn't you? Were you afraid she'd remember, afraid she'd recognize you?" Tears began rolling down Judith's cheeks, but Sam felt no sympathy. Years of police work had hardened him to criminal's remorse, especially when it came too late. "We have Lily's positive identification," Sam continued, leaning forward. "We have your suspicious behavior, your obsession with the case, and I'm willing to bet when we check your old car's records, we'll find repair work done right after the accident date. The evidence is mounting, Judith." He stood up, pushing his chair back with a screech that made Judith flinch. "You're going to rot in jail for what you did. For the lives you took, for abandoning a child in need, for years of deception. Justice is finally catching up to you." Judith's shoulders shook with silent sobs as the weight of her actions finally crashed down around her. The carefully constructed walls of denial she'd built over the years crumbled in the face of exposure. "I hope every day behind bars gives you time to think about what you did to that family," Sam said, gathering the newspaper clippings. "About the years of happiness you stole from a little girl who did nothing wrong." In the days following Judith's arrest, Sam's senior officer, Captain Martinez, called him into his office. The morning sun streamed through the blinds as Sam took a seat across from the weathered desk. "Outstanding work, Miller," Martinez said, his usually stern face softening with approval. "Not many officers would have connected those dots or shown such dedication to protecting a child." Sam shifted in his chair, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing what needed to be done, sir." "No, you did more than that." Martinez leaned forward, clasping his hands on the desk. "You showed real heart here. That's why I'm going to personally contact CPS and recommend you as Lily's adoptive parent. Your record is spotless, and after what you've done to bring justice to her family, I can't think of anyone better suited." Sam's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you, sir. That would mean everything." The following weeks moved at an agonizing pace. Sam visited Lily at the orphanage every day, bringing her books and spending hours listening to her stories. Each visit ended with the same promise, that he was working to bring her home. The adoption process was a maze of paperwork, interviews, and home inspections. Sam painted the spare room in soft yellow tones, filled the bookshelf with children's stories, and added cheerful curtains that Lily had picked out during one of their visits. Margaret, his elderly neighbor, helped prepare the house, offering motherly advice about raising a young girl. She brought over home-cooked meals and helped Sam create a proper schedule for school days. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, Sam received the call he'd been hoping for. The adoption was approved. His hands trembled as he drove to the orphanage one last time, this time to bring Lily home for good. When he arrived, Lily was waiting with her small suitcase and her beloved stuffed rabbit. Her eyes lit up when she saw him, and she ran into his arms. "Is it really true?" she asked, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I get to come home with you?" "It's really true, sweetheart," Sam replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You're coming home for good." They drove home together, Lily chattering excitedly about all the things they could do now that they were officially family. Sam caught glimpses of her in the rearview mirror, her face animated with joy that made his heart swell. As they pulled into the driveway of what was now their home, Sam realized that his earlier weariness with his job had completely vanished. In its place was a renewed sense of purpose and joy he hadn't felt in years. This little girl, who had started as just another case on a late-night patrol, had transformed his life completely. They walked hand in hand to the front door, Lily clutching her rabbit in her other arm. Sam watched as she stepped inside, no longer a temporary guest, but home at last. Her face glowed with happiness as she looked up at him, and in that moment Sam knew that this was exactly where they both belonged. The first few weeks of school brought challenges that neither Sam nor Lily had fully anticipated. Each morning, as Sam drove Lily to Oakwood Elementary, he noticed her growing quieter, her small hands clutching her backpack tighter. In her third-grade classroom, Lily often sat alone during lunch breaks. Being one of the few Asian students in a predominantly white school made her feel different, and her naturally reserved nature didn't help. Some kids whispered and pointed while others simply ignored her. One afternoon, Sam picked her up and immediately noticed her red-rimmed eyes. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he asked gently as they walked to the car. Lily waited until they were inside before the words tumbled out. Jessica said my eyes look funny, and Tommy asked why my skin is yellow. Her voice trembled. And during art class, nobody wanted to sit with me. Sam's heart ached. He pulled into their driveway and turned to face her. Listen to me, Lily. You are beautiful exactly as you are. Those kids just don't understand yet that being different is what makes each person special. Every evening, they developed a routine. While Sam prepared dinner, Lily would sit at the kitchen counter, doing her homework or drawing pictures. He noticed she drew a lot of families, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes including her birth parents. You know, Sam said one evening as he helped her with math problems, it's okay to miss them and love them while also being happy here with me. Lily looked up at him, her dark eyes serious. Sometimes I dream about the accident, she whispered. But then I wake up, and you're here. Sam began leaving her encouraging notes in her lunchbox. Be brave, they would say, or, you are amazing just as you are. Gradually, Lily started coming home with stories about small victories, a girl named Sarah who asked to be her reading partner, or the art teacher who praised her detailed drawings. One night, as Sam tucked her into bed, Lily grabbed his hand. Dad? She said tentatively, testing out the word. It was the first time she'd called him that. Sam's heart swelled. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for choosing me, she said softly. Even when I'm scared or sad, you never give up on me. Sam sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair. I'll never give up on you, Lily. You're my daughter now, and that's forever. The fear of abandonment still surfaced sometimes. Lily would become clingy after nightmares or worry excessively if Sam was even a few minutes late picking her up. But with each passing day, their bond grew stronger. Sam learned to read her moods, to know when she needed space or extra hugs, and Lily gradually began to trust that this new life, this new love, was permanent. Their little family might not have looked like others in the neighborhood, but to Sam and Lily, it was perfect just the way it was. The parent-teacher conference was bustling with activity in Oakwood Elementary's gymnasium. Sam sat proudly next to Lily as Mrs. Thompson, her teacher, shared her latest test scores and assignments. Lily's grades were exceptional, particularly in mathematics and science. She's really flourishing, Mrs. Thompson said warmly. Lily has the highest scores in my class this semester. From behind them, a sharp voice cut through the air. Well, of course she does. Those people are always good at math, aren't they? Karen Matthews, mother of Lily's classmate Jessica, stood with her arms crossed. It's probably all she does at home. They push their kids too hard. Sam felt Lily stiffen beside him. His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Excuse me? Oh, you know what I mean, Karen continued, oblivious to the tension. These Asian kids, they're just little robots. They don't have normal childhoods like our kids do. Sam stood up slowly, his police officer's presence commanding attention. Mrs. Matthews, my daughter excels because she's intelligent and hardworking. She plays soccer, draws beautiful art, and yes, she also happens to be brilliant at math. She's not a stereotype. She's a child with her own unique talents and personality. Karen's face flushed. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, Sam interrupted firmly. And I won't let anyone diminish my daughter's achievements or reduce her to stereotypes. Lily succeeds because she's Lily, not because of what you think about those people. Lily looked up at her father, her eyes wide with emotion. She'd never seen him so fierce yet so controlled. Other parents had stopped to watch, and Mrs. Thompson nodded approvingly. Perhaps, Mrs. Thompson added, you'd like to see Lily's creative writing portfolio? Her story about a detective solving mysteries won our class competition last week. Karen mumbled something inaudible and hurried away. Sam sat back down, placing a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. You okay, sweetheart? Lily nodded, a new determination settling in her eyes. I'm going to win the science fair, she declared, not because I'm Asian, but because I love science and I'm good at it. That's my girl, Sam said proudly. You show them who you are. As they walked to their car after the conference, Lily hugged Sam tightly. Thank you for standing up for me, Dad. Nobody's ever done that before. Sam hugged her back, his heart full. In that moment, Lily made a silent promise to herself. She would excel not to prove others wrong, but to prove herself right. Her father's words echoed in her mind. She wasn't a stereotype, she was Lily Miller, and she would shine in her own unique way. The late spring sun cast a warm glow through the Millers' backyard as friends and family gathered to celebrate Lily's high school graduation. Colorful balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, and a "Congratulations, Graduate" banner stretched across the fence. The small gathering felt perfect, intimate, and filled with genuine love. Sam watched his daughter, now 18, as she chatted with Mrs. Thompson, her former elementary school teacher who had become a close family friend. Lily's graduation gown was draped over the back of her chair, her honor cords and medals gleaming in the sunlight. Her valedictorian speech that morning had brought tears to his eyes. Margaret, their elderly neighbor who had helped watch Lily all those years ago, approached Sam with misty eyes. "Remember that shy little girl who used to hide behind your legs? Look at her now, confident, brilliant, and heading to college." "Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself," Sam replied, his voice thick with emotion. He thought back to that cold night in the park, how close he'd come to simply following protocol. Instead, that decision had changed both their lives forever. As the afternoon wore on, their guests gathered around the picnic table for cake. Lily stood up, holding her glass of lemonade, and the chatter quieted. "I want to thank everyone for being here today," she began, her dark eyes shining. "But especially, I want to thank my dad." She turned to Sam, who felt his heart swell. "You didn't just save me that night in the park. You showed me what unconditional love looks like. Through every challenge, every setback, you were there. When kids at school made me feel different, you taught me to be proud of who I am. When I doubted myself, you believed in me." Sam felt tears welling up as Lily continued. "You supported my love for science, came to every soccer game, and stayed up late helping me with projects. You made me feel safe enough to dream big." She paused, gathering herself. "And speaking of dreams, I got my acceptance letter to pre-med yesterday. I want to be a doctor, Dad. I want to help people the way you helped me." Sam stood up and embraced his daughter, no longer able to hold back his tears. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he whispered. "Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, I'm right here supporting you." Their guests applauded, many wiping away tears of their own. As father and daughter held each other, Sam felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The weary police officer who had lost his sense of purpose had found it again in the love of his daughter. Through their years together, they had healed each other, grown stronger together, and built a bond that nothing could break. As autumn settled over the university campus, Lily found herself immersed in the demanding world of pre-med studies. The library became her second home, its quiet corners filled with thick medical textbooks and detailed anatomy diagrams. Her determination showed in the careful notes she took and the late hours she spent studying, even as other students began to drop out of the program. Sam noticed the dark circles under her eyes during her weekend visits home. He watched as she spread her books across their familiar kitchen table, the same place where he'd helped her with middle school homework years ago. Though his heart ached seeing her exhausted, he couldn't help but feel proud of her unwavering focus. "Honey, you don't need to work at the campus coffee shop," Sam told her one Sunday evening, noting how she dozed off between highlighting passages in her biochemistry textbook. "I can help more with the expenses." Lily shook her head, her familiar determined expression reminding him of the brave little girl who had overcome so much. "Dad, you've already done so much. You worked extra shifts to put me through private school, moved us to a better neighborhood, and never once complained. This is something I need to do." During her shifts at the coffee shop, Lily would recite medical terms while making lattes, turning every moment into a study opportunity. Her co-workers grew used to hearing her mumble about cellular structures while restocking supplies. The paycheck wasn't much, but it helped with books and lab fees, easing some burden off Sam's shoulders. On particularly tough days when the weight of her studies felt overwhelming, Lily would call Sam during his dinner break at the station. He'd listen as she shared stories about her anatomy lab partners or complained about organic chemistry formulas. Though he didn't always understand the medical terminology, he understood her passion, and that was enough. "You know what kept me going today?" she asked during one such call. "I remembered how you never gave up on me, even when everyone said you were crazy to adopt a troubled kid. If you could fight that hard for me, I can fight this hard for my dreams." Sam felt his eyes grow misty at her words. He watched her grow stronger with each challenge, her resilience shining through. When she aced her first semester finals while maintaining her work schedule, Sam couldn't contain his pride. He hung her grade report on the refrigerator just like he'd done with her elementary school art projects. During one of her weekend visits home, Lily found Sam reading one of her medical journals. "Dad, since when are you interested in cellular biology?" she asked, amused. "Well," he chuckled, "I figured if my daughter's going to be a doctor, I should at least try to understand what she's talking about at dinner." That simple gesture touched Lily deeply. Even now, years after that fateful night in the park, Sam was still finding new ways to show his support and love. The call came during Lily's afternoon pathology lecture. Her phone vibrated silently, but something made her check it, a habit she'd developed after years of Sam being her only family. When she saw Margaret's name, her heart skipped a beat. "Lily, dear." Margaret's voice trembled. "Your father's in the hospital. It was a heart attack, but they're saying it's mild. He's stable now." The world seemed to freeze. Lily's medical training kicked in automatically, asking precise questions about symptoms and timing while her hands shook as she packed her books. Within an hour, she was in her car, making the 3-hour drive home, her mind racing between professional knowledge and personal fear. At the hospital, she found Sam looking smaller than she remembered, lying in the sterile white bed with monitors beeping steadily beside him. His face brightened when he saw her, though fatigue lined his features. "You didn't have to come running, sweetheart," he said weakly. "I'm fine." Lily picked up his chart, her trained eyes scanning the numbers and notes. "Minor myocardial infarction," she read aloud, then looked at him sternly. "Dad, why didn't you tell me you were having chest pains?" Sam looked sheepish. "Didn't want to worry you during finals week." Over the next few days, Lily seamlessly switched between roles, medical student and daughter. She spoke with his doctors, understanding their terminology and treatment plans. She asked informed questions about his medication and rehabilitation schedule. During visits, she checked his vitals with professional precision, then held his hand with a daughter's love. "Your girl's gonna make one hell of a doctor," Sam's cardiologist remarked one morning. "She caught something in your EKG that even my resident missed." Sam watched Lily adjust his pillows and explain his new diet restrictions. He remembered the frightened little girl from the park bench, now transformed into this confident young woman who could read medical charts and speak about cardiac enzymes. "You know," Lily said one evening, organizing his pills for the week, "I understand now how you felt that night you found me. That need to protect, to make things better." She paused, looking at him with eyes that held both professional concern and deep love. "You saved my life back then, Dad. You gave me purpose when I had none. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Sam felt tears welling up as he watched her. She moved around his hospital room with quiet efficiency, checking monitors and adjusting his IV line with gentle hands. Her presence brought both medical expertise and the comfort of family, a combination he never could have imagined that cold night in the park. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Watching you now, caring for people, using everything you've learned, you've become more than I ever dreamed possible." Lily sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Everything I am is because you believed in me first. You taught me what it means to care for someone, to fight for them. That's what made me want to become a doctor." During Lily's final year of residency, she encountered Dr. Harrison, a senior physician known for his traditional views and demanding nature. From their first interaction, his skepticism was evident in his dismissive tone and questioning glances. "Where did you say you completed your undergraduate studies?" he asked one morning during rounds, his voice carrying a hint of condescension. The other residents shifted uncomfortably as Dr. Harrison scrutinized Lily's patient notes. "State University, sir," Lily replied firmly, maintaining eye contact despite her racing heart. He muttered, raising an eyebrow. "And your background before that? Any medical professionals in your family?" Lily felt the familiar sting of prejudice, remembering similar moments throughout her education. That evening, she called Sam, her voice tight with frustration. "He keeps questioning my credentials, Dad. Today he basically suggested I only got in through affirmative action." Sam's voice carried the same strength that had comforted her through countless challenges. "Remember what we talked about when those parents at your high school doubted you? Your worth isn't determined by their prejudices. Show them who you are through your work." But he's deliberately giving me the most difficult cases, watching for me to fail. "Then turn those cases into your victories," Sam said firmly. "You've never backed down before. Don't start now." Over the next few weeks, Lily threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She stayed late studying complex cases, double-checking her diagnoses, and spending extra time with patients. When Dr. Harrison questioned her treatment plans, she defended them with solid medical evidence and careful reasoning. The turning point came during a particularly challenging case. A patient presented with unusual symptoms that had stumped the other residents. Lily noticed a subtle pattern in the lab results that others had missed. Despite Dr. Harrison's initial dismissal of her theory, she respectfully but firmly presented her findings during rounds. "The combination of these markers suggests Wilson's disease," she explained, pointing to the test results. "It's rare, but it fits all the symptoms." Dr. Harrison's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise as he reviewed her analysis. Further tests confirmed Lily's diagnosis, potentially saving the patient from serious complications. That afternoon, Dr. Harrison called Lily into his office. "I owe you an apology, Dr. Evans," he said, his usual stern demeanor softened. "I made assumptions about your capabilities based on prejudices I shouldn't have held. Your work these past weeks, especially today, has shown me how wrong I was." That evening, Lily shared her victory with Sam over dinner. "You were right, Dad. Standing my ground and letting my work speak for itself was the right approach." Sam beamed with pride. "You've always had this strength inside you, Lily. Sometimes people just need to be shown their own biases before they can grow past them." "I learned that from you," Lily said softly. "The way you always taught me to face challenges head-on, with dignity and determination. It's shaped everything I do." Sam sat in his favorite armchair, surrounded by framed photos chronicling his journey with Lily. At 72, retirement had given him plenty of time to reflect on the remarkable path they'd traveled together. His weathered hands traced the edge of a recent photograph, Lily in her white coat, standing proud outside her medical practice. The afternoon sun streamed through the window as he remembered that fateful night in Oakwood Park. Who could have known that the small, frightened girl on the bench would become the accomplished woman she was today? His chest swelled with pride thinking about her latest achievement, being named Chief of Internal Medicine at her hospital. "Dad?" Lily's voice called from the kitchen. She visited him every Sunday, bringing groceries and sharing stories from her week. "Tea's ready." Sam smiled, watching her move confidently through his home. Their home. She placed the steaming mugs on the coffee table and settled beside him on the couch, just as she had countless times before. "I saw Mrs. Rodriguez today," Lily said, her eyes bright with compassion. "She reminded me of how you used to sit with me during thunderstorms when I first came to live with you. Said she sees that same patience in how I treat my patients." Sam's eyes grew misty. "You've become quite something, kiddo. Far more than I could have ever imagined that night in the park." Lily reached for one of the photos on the side table, her medical school graduation. In it, Sam stood beside her, beaming with pride. "You know, every time I face a difficult situation at work, I think about what you taught me, about standing up for what's right even when it's hard." "I just showed you what was already in your heart," Sam replied softly. "You did all the hard work yourself." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their tea. Sam noticed how Lily's presence filled the room with warmth, just as it had filled his life with purpose. The lonely years before finding her seemed like a distant memory now. "Remember when you used to help me with my science homework?" Lily chuckled. "You'd spend hours learning the material yourself just so you could explain it to me." "And look at you now," Sam grinned, "teaching me about medical terms I can barely pronounce." Lily's expression grew serious. "You gave me more than just a home, Dad. You showed me what it means to truly care for someone. That's what makes me a good doctor, what I learned from you." Sam felt his heart swell with emotion. Watching Lily grow from a scared child into this confident, compassionate doctor had been the greatest joy of his life. Every struggle, every moment of doubt had been worth it to see her flourish and touch so many lives through her work. The auditorium buzzed with excitement as hundreds of newly minted doctors prepared to receive their degrees. Sam sat in the front row, his heart swelling with pride as he watched Lily stand with her fellow residents. Her dark hair was neatly pinned back, and even from this distance he could see her bright smile. "Dr. Lily Miller," the announcer called, and Sam's eyes welled with tears as she walked across the stage. Her white coat gleamed under the lights, her movements confident and graceful. As she accepted her certificate, she turned toward the audience, catching Sam's eye. Their shared look spoke volumes. Years of late-night study sessions, countless encouragement, and unwavering support had led to this moment. After the ceremony, Lily rushed through the crowd to find him. "Dad!" she called out, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Sam held her close, remembering the frightened little girl from the park bench who had changed his life forever. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So incredibly proud." Their small group of friends gathered around them, Margaret, who had helped watch Lily all those years ago, and several of Sam's former police colleagues who had become like family. They had reserved a table at Lily's favorite restaurant to celebrate. During dinner, Sam watched as Lily chatted animatedly about her plans for her medical practice. Her eyes sparkled with determination and purpose, the same spark he'd noticed when she'd first declared her dream of becoming a doctor. "I wouldn't be here without you, Dad," Lily said suddenly, turning to face him. The table grew quiet. "When you found me that night, I was lost in every way possible. But you saw something in me worth saving. You taught me to believe in myself, to stand up against prejudice, to never give up on my dreams." Sam reached for her hand across the table. "You gave me something too, Lily. Before you came into my life, I was just going through the motions. Being your father gave me purpose again. Watching you grow, helping you chase your dreams, it brought joy back into my life." Margaret raised her glass. "To Sam and Lily, proof that family isn't about blood, but about love and courage." As their friends toasted, Sam reflected on their journey together. He remembered the nights he'd spent worrying about Judith, the struggle to adopt Lily, the challenges they'd faced with prejudice and discrimination. Every obstacle had been worth it to see her achieve her dreams. Lily squeezed his hand. "You know what I remember most? Not the big moments, but the little ones. You learning to braid my hair even though you were terrible at it. The way you'd leave encouraging notes in my lunchbox. How you never missed a single school event no matter how tired you were from work." Sam smiled, his heart full. The scared, lonely cop who once patrolled Oakwood Park had found his true calling, not just in saving a child, but in becoming the father she needed. And Lily, in turn, had filled his life with more love and meaning than he'd ever thought possible. The years that followed Lily's graduation brought new rhythms to their lives. She found a cozy apartment just 15 minutes from Sam's house, close enough for frequent visits, but allowing her the independence she needed as a young doctor. The walls of her new home quickly filled with photos, moments from her childhood with Sam, her graduation, and now pictures of her with grateful patience. Sam noticed how Lily's eyes lit up whenever she talked about her work at the local clinic. She'd often drop by after her shifts, still in her scrubs, eager to share stories about her day. Sometimes she'd bring takeout and they'd sit at his familiar kitchen table, just like they had during her school years. "You wouldn't believe this little boy today, Dad," Lily said one evening, helping herself to more pasta. He was so scared of getting his shots, but I told him about how you taught me to be brave. Used your old police officer stories and everything?" Sam chuckled, his weathered face crinkling with joy. "Using my stories to help your patients now, huh?" "They work. Besides, everything I learned about connecting with people I learned from you." Lily's voice softened. "Remember how patient you were when I first came to live with you? How you'd sit with me during those nightmares?" Sam nodded, remembering those early days. The frightened little girl who would wake up crying had grown into a confident woman who helped heal others. His retirement years, which he'd once feared would be empty, were now filled with these precious moments. During their weekly dinners, Lily would often bring medical journals she was studying or discuss challenging cases, asking for his perspective. Though Sam couldn't offer medical advice, his years of experience dealing with people in crisis proved valuable. He loved watching her mind work, seeing how she approached each patient with the same compassion he'd shown her. "You know," Lily said one Sunday afternoon as they sat on his porch, "I was thinking about that night in the park. How different my life would have been if you hadn't stopped." She reached for his hand, now marked with age spots but still strong. "You didn't just save me from the cold that night. You saved me from a life without love, without purpose." Sam squeezed her hand gently. "Truth is, Lily, you saved me too. I was just going through the motions before you came along. You gave me a reason to keep going, to be better." He paused, looking at the woman who had become his daughter in every way that mattered. "I might have given you a home, but you gave me a family." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Their bond, forged through years of challenges and triumphs, had grown stronger with each passing day. Blood might make relatives, but love and choice had made them family. The community center buzzed with excitement as people filled the rows of chairs. Sam adjusted his tie, feeling both proud and slightly nervous as he sat in the front row. The annual Healthcare Heroes Award ceremony was about to begin, and Lily was among those being honored. The room quieted as the hospital director took the stage. "Tonight, we recognize those who've gone above and beyond in their service to our community," she began. "Our next honoree, Dr. Lily Miller, has shown exceptional dedication to pediatric care, particularly in helping underprivileged children." Sam's eyes welled up as a video played on the large screen. Patients and their families shared stories about Lily, how she stayed late to comfort anxious parents, how she made house calls to families without transportation, how she never gave up on difficult cases. "Dr. Miller doesn't just treat illnesses," one mother said on screen, holding her young daughter. "She treats the whole person. She understands what it's like to face challenges, and she gives hope to everyone she meets." When Lily took the stage, she looked radiant in her dark blue dress. Her voice was steady and clear as she addressed the crowd. "This award means so much to me, but I wouldn't be here without one person. My father, Sam Miller." She turned toward him, her eyes shining. 20 years ago, he was a police officer who found a scared little girl in a park. He could have simply followed protocol, but instead, he followed his heart. Sam felt tears rolling down his cheeks as Lily continued. "He taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about love, choice, and commitment. Every time I help a child, I think of how he helped me. Every time I stay late with a worried parent, I remember how he sat with me through countless nightmares." In the audience, several people wiped their eyes as Lily spoke. "My father showed me that one person's compassion can change a life forever. He gave me more than a home. He gave me the courage to believe in myself and the strength to help others." After the ceremony, as people gathered for refreshments, Sam found himself surrounded by well-wishers. Colleagues, patients, and community members came to shake his hand, thanking him for raising such an exceptional doctor. But Sam barely heard their words. His eyes were on Lily, who moved through the crowd with grace and warmth, the same gentle spirit she'd always had, now touching countless lives. When Lily finally made her way to him, she wrapped him in a tight hug. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. Sam held her close, remembering the tiny girl who had once clutched a stuffed rabbit on a park bench. His heart felt full to bursting with gratitude and joy. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. So very proud. If you enjoyed the story of Lily, I hand-picked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.